Oh, they are on. They're on. Okay. Good morning. It's July 18th, 2023, the Scott County Ditch Board meeting. You all received the minutes in your packets. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the February 21st, 2023 ditch board minutes.
There's a motion
Second.
and there's a second. Thank you both. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we're going to move on to 3.1, adopt resolution number 2023-183, awarding contracts to Husky Construction, Inc. and Bornicke Construction, Inc. for the repair of Scott County Drainage Ditch number 10. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As a little recap, at the February 21st meeting, it was ordered to go ahead with the repair of County Ditch 10. We contracted with ISG, the engineering firm, through the bidding process. So the project was advertised for bid on May 19th, and the bid opening happened on June 8th. We packaged this as 4 separate bid packages to try to get the best price for the landowners of the repair of the ditch. So we had bid package one dealt with clearing of the trees. Bid package 2 was for the cleaning of the ditch. Bid package 3 was for replacing culverts. And then bid package 4 was a comprehensive overall in case one contractor wanted to do the entire project. After we received the bids, we did have another landowner meeting on June 22nd, held at SWCD, and that was advertised with all of the benefited owners. And we were seeking feedback from them as to what they would prefer to see as the final bids are awarded. All of the bid packages also had alternatives, which could be add-ons or things subtracted to help come up with the best cost for the landowners. So prior to that meeting, ISG had made some recommendations to make the project more cost-effective because the bids did come in a little higher than the estimates. So those were all presented to the landowners at that meeting. And we did receive feedback from the people in attendance. After the meeting, then ISG prepared their final recommendation based on that landowner feedback. And we do have them here today to present that final recommendation for you. So I'll call it Bailey, who will present that for you.
Don't worry about it.
Good morning. My name is Bailey Griffin. I'm with ISG. I am a water resources engineer that works on drainage system projects such as the Scott County Ditch 10, replacing Daryl Pettis, which I'm sure you had been working with previously.
I'm Joe Dockers. I worked on a lot of design on this project. I'm also with ISG.
And just to kind of help facilitate going through all of the numbers of how the bids came in, I just have a presentation. This is what we went over with the landowners at the meeting, just so that I'm not rambling off a bunch of numbers to you today. So we did go over, Chris went over kind of how we went ahead and set up the bids. We did 4 different bid packages. The first bid pack was the trees. The second bid pack was looking at the ditch cleaning and all of the other repairs associated with the open ditch, so bank stabilization and repairing tile outlets. And the last bid pack looked at replacing the culverts that were approved in the repair report. Those were the individual bid packs, and then the last bid package number 4, was essentially combining all of those together into one bid pack. There was also alternatives that were built into the packages so that we could compare costs for different options, as well as have the kind of ability to approve or deny different things with the contract. So one thing that we did go ahead and do right off the bat was looking at the trees near the outlet. This was something that had changed right from the repair report. This eliminated looking at removal of the trees within that 200-foot easement, which we didn't think was necessary in terms of constructability. I'll fast forward through some of this that Chris kind of already went over. All right, jumping to the bid results. So I'll talk through some of the alternates that we decided to go through. The bid package one, the trees, our first base bid. So the base bid is essentially the base of the package. You would approve that or deny that as a whole. The alternate, you could approve or deny individually. So for the bid pack one with the trees, the base bid included removing the trees from one side of the buffer and then both sides of the side slope, while the alternate looked at removing the trees from the other side of the side slope. So essentially, we thought that the contractor would be able to construct and do the repairs with only removing trees from one side of the ditch, although it is common practice to look at removing trees from both sides of the ditch. The second bid package was looking at the ditch work, so cleaning the 6 different segments of ditch. The bid alternate was included the alternative side inlets, which are the surface inlets that go into the ditch. These are eligible for grant funding, so we wanted to separate those out to ensure that if we were to get the grant funding, we could include those, although those could be reconsidered if we didn't get grant funding for those, if those would be included or not. The third bid package looked at the culvert replacements. We did do a prioritization of the culverts, looking at the conditions and capacities of those culverts to assess which culverts might have the highest priority for replacement. We included 5 culverts in the base bid, and then there was 4 culverts that were included each individually as 4 different alternates based off of that prioritization that we looked at in the ranking. And then again, the last bid package included all of the bid packs together, and those also included all of the alternates, so there were multiple alternates within the bid package 4. All right, jumping into the results of that bid. So the first bid package of the trees, Husky Construction, was the low bidder with a total bid of $187,875. We did see that the base bid and alternates came in a little bit higher for the tree removals than anticipated in some of the areas where there was less dense trees. That was one thing that we tried to do to frame up areas where there was sporadic, 1 or 2 trees there that just needed to be removed, that those would be a significant lower cost if we were to separate out and divide out that heavy vegetation from the single trees, and that just wasn't the case of how those bids came in. So this just kind of shows you the base bid versus what the alternate looks like there. This is common of what kind of the tree clearing when we combine those 2 categories together of what we're seeing in different areas throughout the state in terms of costs. So don't anticipate that it would be probably much lower. The second package was the ditch work. The low bidder for this was Bornicke Construction. Their total bid was $642,883.65. And the last bid package 3 for the culverts, was Bornicke Construction with a total bid of $327,775.25. And that also includes the 4 different alternates for the 4 culverts for $63,855.75. One of the main differences in cost with the culverts was the exceedance on the 72-inch pipes and concrete pipes in general. These are very volatile right now in terms of pricing that we're seeing across the board, not just in ditch work, but in other types of projects as well. And don't anticipate that those material costs are going to be reducing or being lowered anytime in the near future. The last bid pack, those 4 bid packs together, the low bidder for this was Groundworks Backhoe Services. Their total bid was $1,241,334.45. This is more expensive than the 3 bid packs combined, so we would move forward with the 3 individual bid packs versus combining the bid packs into one. And it's about approximately $100,000 in savings compared to combining the bid packs together. We did go over a number of cost-saving measures with the landowners and got their feedback on this. One thing that was included was temporary seating. This was quite a bit higher than what we had initially anticipated. And we have talked with both of the contractors in switching that seating method from a rapid stabilization to doing broadcast seating. And that alone saves the landowners and the contract pricing $78,410 in total. Again, the ASIs and ASIROs, we do plan to apply for grant funding for this. The grant application is going to be opening, is anticipated to open this fall, which would, if awarded, we would receive a 75% cost share for those alternative side inlets, which would cover $28,533.75. We also looked at additional items that could be recommended for removal. This included looking at the tree clearing near the outlet. We're not doing any open ditch cleaning, so in terms of in ways that we could do the project, we could do the project without having to remove these trees, and this could be a repair that's done at a later date if there are problems with that outlet section. We also looked at removing the aprons from the culverts. This is pretty common in ditch projects to not include aprons on the culverts for field crossings or township roads. And then we also considered looking at the 4 different culvert alternates if those wanted to be done at a later time or wait for a longer lifespan on those until they're finished to do those at a later date. So in total, the adjusted cost summaries, when looking at the different bid items that we would recommend changing, the adjusted low bid price, and we separated it out into landowner costs, road authority costs, and total costs, would be just under $1 million.
Sorry, these are the numbers we showed the landowners. They ended up wanting to do the tree clearing at the outlet. That was they said that, we've waited too long and we should get rid of the trees at the outlet. So we did include that cost on there. So in the bid recommendation letter is updated, it's just over $1 million.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. I did not update this from that. So 1 million, the total cost would be $8,902. Apologies.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to know a little bit more because my understanding on those couple acres there is that those trees are not really impacting or anything. What was the reasoning that, and I know there were 10 landowners there, so not like a majority or anything. What was that reasoning for that much money?
So when looking at trees can be one of the main factors on a ditch of how it might impact flows. And it's not necessarily that those trees are impacting the ditch currently. However, there are factors such as beaver dams, which can be a really big nuisance to drainage ditches. And when you have dense trees along ditches like this, they can become a real big issue. And incur costs down the line too, because when you do have beavers, usually there are beaver dam removal costs as well as trapping costs that take a long time to do. So that was kind of the thoughts on that and the feedback that we received from the landowners.
Another item too was some of the landowners were not pleased that they want the buffers taken care of so they don't have to do this 20 years from now and have a higher expense. So they were all very much in favor of getting rid of the trees within the outlet. And then on top of that, even though our tree prices did come in high, the prices at the outlet were actually lower than what we thought. So the prices are good prices for that specific area too.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm not in disagreement, but I want to be.
Yeah.
I'm not in disagreement, but I want to be able to speak to that, so thank you.
I remember how much controversy there was at the repair hearing, so I appreciate that.
Another, just Another thing that was brought up at the meeting was, if trees were to fall in this area and cause a blockage, then there would be work that would need to be done to access, to remove that blockage. And so they just preferred to have it taken care of with this project.
So that's, I'm gonna skip over some of the, we did go over, examples of what construction would look like and, kind of our, previous work with Bornicke. We have worked with Bornicke, so we had some, examples of their work, and we did show that to the landowners as well, but I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the conclusion here. We did meet with landowners a couple of weeks ago and went over this with them. So this falls in line with kind of what they would recommend for this repair for those that were there. We did see that the bids came in higher than what was anticipated from our engineer's estimate. However, we do have multiple items where we would recommend removing different things from the contract in order to reduce costs. That includes changing the temporary seating items, adjusting and removing the aprons, and then installing the ASIs contingent upon the grant funding in the future. We have not worked with Husky Construction before. However, they have met the specification requirements that we included in the public bid, which included the 5% bid bond. They did have project references, 5 project references from the last 5 years. We did reach out to those references and sufficient equipment to complete the work. So for that reason, we would recommend moving forward with the contract with Husky Construction for bid pack 1. We have worked with Bornicke quite a bit, and they do meet the specification requirements as well, and believe and know that they are qualified to perform the work that's outlined within bid packs 2 and 3. So we would recommend awarding those contracts with the modifications noted throughout the presentation. So with that, that's the presentation and kind of our recommendation for award. Is there any questions from the board?
Any questions or comments from anybody? Commissioner Brecky.
First of all, just thank you for the work on it. I really appreciate your work, staff's work on breaking up and looking at the alternate bid packages. I think, that was a request from the landowners, needed to look at it. Request about just doing one side of the ditch, even though for some of us, we're like, does that make sense? Just good to know what the numbers were. So I appreciate everybody's work on it. Yeah, I was just trying to look where Husky Construction is from. It looks like they're out of Elk River. Is that right? Or is that a different one? There's a couple.
No.
I think they're local.
Are they local?
I believe northern part of the suburbs.
Okay,
Oh, so maybe, okay.
So that could be all.
It could be Elk River.
I think
okay. Yeah, so that was my question, but thank you. Appreciate
So
it.
when did this go out for bid? Was this a few months ago? I can't remember when. Right after we did the thing, right?
It was bid in May, and then it was open for about 3 weeks, and then it closed the first week of June.
And do you think that the time of year maybe caused things to be high? Is that a possibility, or?
It does vary throughout the year. There are windows, I would say, that are more beneficial to bid in. I don't say yes or no, I feel like beginning of summer is a good time to bid because that's when most people are gonna wanna do their work, is the middle of summer and then in fall, so.
Because I keep hearing it's in the winter time, so I don't know anymore.
I actually think the bids came in pretty fair. There's a couple of items that we added on that made them higher, like the temporary seating. It's kind of a new practice we've done, just for erosion protection. And the seed mix we put on there was way higher than we thought it was gonna be. So once we changed that, it dropped the prices there. And then the tree prices, the way we tried to bid it didn't work as well as we'd hoped it would work. But when we looked at the actual results, they weren't bad, they were actually favorable. So I think the timing was fine. I know that Bornicke was hungry, so.
Otherwise, just plant a little garden and the weeds will take over and you wouldn't need to seed nothing.
Exactly.
That's what happens at home. A weed inspector, okay. Commissioner
Mr.
Brackey.
Chair, could you just remind us on the projects, what we're anticipating the schedule to look like?
Yeah, so I believe Husky Construction, we did talk with him, and if he is to be awarded the contract, he would be starting as soon as possible. So the trees do need to be done first so that there can be access to the site to be able to complete the rest of it. So they would, their deadline to finish the work is October of this year. And then I would anticipate Bornicke would come out. They would essentially, since they are the low bid on bid pack 2 and 3, they would essentially do the work systematically throughout the watershed, starting at the outlet and moving upstream. And that would begin next year. I think once we get a little bit closer to the dates on summer, fall work, that they would be able to let us know. And the deadline for theirs would be October of next year.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to this agenda item?
Mr. Chair, so moved that we adopt resolution number 2023-183, awarding contracts to Husky Construction Incorporated and Warnicki Construction Incorporated for the repair of Scott County Drainage Ditch number 10.
There's a motion. Is there a second? There is a second by Commissioner Brennan. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Oh. Leslie, do you have something?
What, just when you were done, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, nobody opposes, motion carries. I think that's our last item on here, unless Leslie, you had something?
I just wanted to note that we did follow through in Belle Plaine Township. You saw it on the county board agenda, because it's the county board that has the authority to extend the payment date, like we've done with the smaller cities and the townships when they've needed that. So that'll be on your county board agenda, that they will pay you in 10 payments over 10 years. And they actually executed that agreement at their meeting last week. So that's all taken care of.
Okay, good. Thank you. With that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. A second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you. You got it. Barb was right.
I like it when I'm right. Doesn't happen very often.
Good morning. We're going to call the July 18th, 2023 Scott County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Would you all please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning again for July 18th, 2023. You all have your agendas. I don't think there's any amendments today. You received the minutes in your packages. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Mr. Chair, so moved.
There's a motion and there's a second by Commissioner Ulrich. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recognition of interested citizens limited to 5 minutes per person or subject. Is there anybody who would like to approach the microphone and tell us how good we are, how bad we are, anything? Nothing. Okay, thank you. Then we're going to receive some information here from legislature, Representative Ben Bakenberg. I call him Bakenberger. So, good morning, Representative.
Morning. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for those that are coming. My name is Representative Ben Bakeberg. I have the privilege to serve the people of 54B, which is Jordan, Prior Lake, a portion of Shakopee, and then the surrounding townships. I wanted to just give you a brief update. You've had a lot of information given to you about this legislative session, but I wanted to just start off by saying thank you, and thank you for your partnership. You guys were wonderful partners, whether it be at scale, advocating for the needs of our constituents across Scott County, and then also at the Capitol, and really having great legislative agenda laid out for us as representatives to be able to accurately advocate for the needs of Scott County. So I want to thank you for that, and I look forward to that partnership moving forward in the future so that we can continue to work for our common interests for our communities. The session has come to a close, and honestly, we will not know the full impact of the session probably for years to come. I just had a great conversation with Sheriff Hennon, and there are some really good things that happened. And then there are some things that I'm not as excited about. Maybe other people in the room are excited, but I'm not. But that's okay. But when we come together to serve our communities, we're going to have some differences, but we need to find that common ground. So the session's come to an end, and I just want to highlight, I'm not going to go deep into it because I know you've had other presentations, but a few of the priorities from Scott County that you advocated for just to talk through. You talked about community corrections, and that was one of the main priorities. And there's 43 million total, about 2.6 million for Scott County for community corrections. So that is a positive thing. The DMV fees, and there was an increase in that. The child protection paperwork reduction, we have a study coming to be able to really talk about, okay, what are those pieces that need to be done, and then what are those pieces that are not required, that are burdensome to our child protection workers. And I think it's important for people to understand that when a child protection worker or any employee is sitting behind the desk doing paperwork, they're not out serving the community and working with kids. So anything that we can do to reduce that paperwork will be something that I'm going to be advocating for. So just for the community to know, my normal job, I'm a middle school principal. So I see on a day-to-day basis special education teachers spending an insane amount of time on paperwork, not serving kids. Also, my mom was a special ed teacher, so I distinctly remember her sitting at our kitchen table in the evenings doing paperwork. So, and a lot of those things, a lot of those paperwork burdens are not required. They're additional things that we as the state have put in place. The 48-hour rule, we've talked, there's been a lot of discussion about that. You know, and when the bed becomes available is an issue that we just need to continue to work together on. I'd like to take a couple moments and highlight some of the bonding projects, and I think it's really important that you give credit where credit is due, and I want to publicly thank Representative Tabke and Senator Pratt for the work that we were able to do on a bipartisan manner to be able to get these infrastructure projects for Scott County. So the boat ramps on Prior Lake and in Spring Lake, we were able to secure $500,000 to be able to address the boat ramps in Prior Lake. If you're unfamiliar, the DeWitt ramp is unusable from what I understand, and with where the water levels are, and then the other ramp on Prior and Spring are in need of repair. So that funding was able to be able to address those. The riverbank stabilization here in Shakopee and in Merriam Junction are critical and important. And then the Highway 169-282 project in Jordan. I live in Jordan, and I have seen accidents happen there. And when I started teaching in Jordan 20-some years ago, there was talk about, we're going to get the overpass done. We're going to get that project done. Fast forward 20 plus years, we finally got the last $9.1 million in the transportation bill to get that done. And this is where I want to just pause and highlight what can happen when people put partisan politics aside and focus on what's best for the constituents of the county. So Representative Tabke, myself, Senator Pratt, and really the whole corridor of representatives along 169 came together and we worked together for this project. And I'd also like to highlight Chair Hornstein. He's the chair of the Transportation Committee. He's from Minneapolis. He and I see the world differently on a lot of different topics. But we sat in my office we had multiple conversations, one in particular in my office, and we talked about Jordan. And over the interim last year, he and his wife stayed at the Nicollet Mansion in Jordan. And they had dinner at the tap room in Jordan. And we just had a conversation about Jordan and the importance of that project and the importance of the safety to the people in the community. And then also the importance of the safety for people living on the other side of 169 in order to get to school, which is what I see, and then, you know, into the McDonald's, the Triangle Lane area. Congresswoman Craig was able to get money through a RISE grant to be able to have a pedestrian crossing to go underneath. And even before I ran, I was passionate about that pedestrian crossing because I saw kids come to school with their feet wet as they were walking under the bridge. And when the water was high, they would step in the water or their feet would be muddy. So having a safe access from one side of 169 to the other side was critically important. So I wanted to take a moment and thank Representative Tapke, Congresswoman Craig, Chair Hornstein, Senator Pratt for the work that was done to be able to get this done. Also to County Administrator Vermillion, you know, all of you that were involved in multiple Zoom calls and phone calls and advocating for the project, I want to say thank you on behalf of my constituents in Jordan and across Scott County. I think it's important to note that this isn't just a Jordan project. This is of critical importance to not only all of Scott County, but the state of Minnesota when you think about that main trunk highway and thoroughfare from just an agriculture and commerce standpoint. So moving on, you know, counties, cities, school districts, there's a lot that happened within the session that we frankly don't know the full impact of it. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to go into it, but looking at the legalization of marijuana, you know, public safety and the different components around public safety, paid family medical leave, there was additional funding for nursing homes, the different tax increases. I think it's important there was a 40% increase in state government, which I have concerns about what's going to happen down the line and when we don't have a $17.5 billion surplus. So what that looks like is going to be concerning and may lead to you having some very difficult decisions at this table to have conversations. As I said, my background is education, so I don't want to miss an opportunity to highlight and talk a little bit about education if you can humor me, because as I look around this room, every single person in here has gone to a school, whether it's a public school, a private school, a charter school, a home school, or you have friends, family, kids that are going to schools. And I think it's important as community members, we understand the impact of the education bill on our communities. So there are a number of things that are going to benefit kids. In the education bill, there is a 4 and 2 on the formula. That's indexed to inflation. Cross subsidy, there's a 40% addressing the cross subsidy. And basically what that is a requirement from the federal level to provide special education services. But there's the requirement, but there's not funding. So the state is picking that up. There's a historic investment in reading. It's called the READ Act. Frankly, I don't think it's enough money to be put in. That might be funny coming from a Republican saying that we didn't spend enough money, but half of our kids can't read at grade level right now. And I look at an investment in literacy, and Sheriff Hennon and I were talking about kind of addressing those root causes of issues. Boy, if we can address the literacy issue, that takes care of a whole host of other issues down the line. Chair Hornstein from the Transportation Committee, he had a bill called, it was about Holocaust and Indigenous Genocide Education. And I think it is a fantastic bill for us to understand our history so that we don't repeat it in the future. It's not pitting groups against each other, it's educating people about our past, what happened, why it happened, and how to not repeat it. I think one of the things why I was so passionate in support of that bill is because I took a group of students to Auschwitz in one of my previous schools, and we stood on, below the gate that everyone sees, and we talked about not repeating our past. And There was funding for mental health as well. But I think it's important to understand that there were over 65 mandates put on schools. And all the funding that went to schools is going to tie the hands of local school boards so they do not have the funding and flexibility that they need. So it's important for the community to understand that when Prior Lake Savage or Shakopee or Jordan, they have to make budget reductions or they have to go out for a referendum, it is because they do not have the funding and flexibility. It's similar to the discussion that you guys are going to have here. So I think when a school board or a county board has to make decisions, we as the community can get really upset. But oftentimes they're making decisions that we at the legislature have forced on them. So I just want to make that very, very crystal clear. So just on a personal note, it's great to be back at school. I was joking with some people and we were having a conversation. They said, Ben, you're a middle school principal. I would never choose to go back to middle school. And they said, was there a lot of similarities between the behavior that you saw at the middle school and the behavior that you saw at the Capitol? And the simple reality is there is a lot of similarities. Someone doesn't get their way, they pitch a fit. So my principal skills maybe came in handy at different times. But I look forward to working with each of you, working with Representative Tabke and Senator Pratt, where we can find common grounds to support all of Scott County, regardless of our political affiliation. With that, I will open it up to questions or comments.
Okay, any questions or comments? Commissioner Ulrich, turn on your mic, please. Thank you.
I have this question, and maybe I should ask you privately this question, but I'll ask you here. We had the legislative presentation at scale from a variety of legislators, and there were almost no questions. And I think the reason there were no questions is we didn't want to ask questions that would offend, others that maybe have a different perspective. So I guess I wonder how you navigate, wanting to collaborate, wanting to cooperate, wanting to work together, and then strongly disagreeing on a whole other category of things, how you maintain relationship and how you don't offend and how you can do that when you maybe strongly disagree and vigorously disagree on some points. How do you navigate that?
Well, that's a good question. I think it comes down to relationships, to be honest. So one of my goals, just professionally as a building principal, is to build relationships with people. Just as a human being, you build relationships with people, and then you have honest conversations behind the scenes with people. I will never share the private conversations that I have with someone that I disagree with publicly. I think that's wrong to do because you erode trust. And so that's what I've tried to do my entire life. And, I think with a partisan piece, I'll give you an example. So there's a bill, it's post-secondary enrollment option. It's a PSEO legislation. And I could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I see that bill. So basically what it is, there are two faith-based institutions that have a statement of faith requirement in order to attend those institutions. And there's one perspective is that those institutions are discriminating against people that will not adhere to their statement of faith. I see it differently. I see it as those institutions have their First Amendment right to be able to maintain their environment. So this started in 2017. One of the assistant attorney generals for then Attorney General Lori Swanson said, we're not going to touch that. That's a First Amendment issue. That changed with the trifecta. So throughout the session, and it's all public, so you can see it if you'd like, I was very direct, very honest, and what I said in public is what I said in private. And I think we as a legislature discriminated against those faith-based institutions. And on the floor, I talked about that. And I talked about how my faith allows me to be able to hear another perspective and still appreciate that person as a human being. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to compromise on my conviction and values. It just means that I'm going to tell you right to your face where I'm at on it. And when I was meeting with some of the representatives, they said, Ben, I appreciate your approach to that. We disagree with you on a lot of different things, but we appreciate the approach that you take, and not belittling, not demeaning, but just being very forthright with, this is where I'm at, this is why I believe what I believe. So that's what I did and will continue to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. The irony is that two of us attended one of those.
So,
Oh, was it 3?
full disclosure, I went to Northwestern as well, so.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the representative? Oh, Commissioner Beer.
Yeah, I would just say I appreciate that perspective. It's a fresh set of eyes. This is term number 1, right? So having a fresh set of eyes and an honest perspective and understanding things like you just articulated. But also it's important that for a body like this to understand that you understand that decisions made uphill, I would say flush twice, it's a long way from St. Paul. There's mandates that come on us that tie our hands, and it drives me nuts. So it's nice to have an advocate up in St. Paul to carry some water for us. So I would also say, going back to the paperwork, like paperwork gives me hives. And there's a lot of paperwork, computer work that has to happen. I know at one point in time, didn't some representative or some elected official come and sit and watch us keystroke? Like, that invitation's always open. If you, maybe you already have, but to really understand what our folks have to do in some of our departments
Yeah.
so that invitation is always open.
Well, and so right now, during session, I talked a lot, and I just said, on May 27th, I have to go back to school and implement this garbage. And I said it like that. I mean, that's maybe the honesty part coming out in me, where I should have been more political. But frankly, right now, there are some good things that happened, but I'm doing my staff handbook and our parent and student handbook, and it's like, this makes absolutely no sense. So, yeah. So I see that, I hear that, and I would continue to do that. One of the things I forgot to mention is truancy, where we are working on addressing truancy. So County Attorney Hocevar and Commissioner, Administrator Vermillion and I have had lots of conversations about how can we address truancy, because that's a root cause issue. Because if we can get kids in school and not missing school, well, then they're learning to read. Then those literacy rates will improve. But just at a simple level, the kids are getting fed. They're having access to people, to more people that love and care for them. So getting kids in school is a huge passion of mine, and we have some bills that we're going to be working through to kind of reduce the burden on the county and the schools to help with that. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Brecky.
Just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being so accessible this session. I think for me, for different groups I've worked with, for citizens, you're just very accessible, and that's really important and around the community, but very accessible at the Capitol too. So just to add on, thanks for that.
Okay. Commissioner Brennan.
I just want to confirm that I spoke to a school board member recently, and they talked about how grateful they were for the work that you've done, and that eventually impacts us at the county. So, yeah, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming today. You seem
you.
to have drawn a crowd.
Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I see a Mayor of Savage is here this morning, so just wanted to point that out. Found out all about where she went to school this morning, by the way. So, okay, we're going to move on to 6.1 to receive information on Scott County delivers topic behavioral health crisis response. Is that Ron Hosevar down there? There. Okay. Are we ready to start it up?
Good morning,
Chris,
Mr.
yep.
Chairman, Commissioners. We're really very excited to have this conversation with you this morning. This is Scott County Delivers discussion on our crisis mental health services. And really our first chance to hear from the folks that are working on our new coordinated response program. As you know, that has been a program that was designed and built to be part of the continuum of mental health services that we've been trying to build in Scott County for the last 10 years. This program fills an identified gap, and many of our participants are going to talk about that today. It is a look, we have, I think, 4 months of data for you. So I offer that just to keep in context. This is a brand new program, and I really applaud this group for being willing to come forward and share the early learnings with you from that project. This is data that a couple of you have requested to appear on that weekly commissioners dashboard, and so we're working with this group to make that available to you on an ongoing basis, but really wanted to prioritize this conversation first and really are interested in, excuse me, in your thoughts and what else you are interested in knowing about. We're going to handle this just slightly differently this morning. I'm going to ask the facilitators to introduce themselves, ask the panel to introduce themselves. We're going to do some questions. I'm going to pause and give time for people in the audience to either ask questions or make comments. We have many representatives from this project here today, and I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to share their thoughts. And then we'll turn it back over to the commissioners for final comments. I do also want to share your comment, Mr. Chair, welcoming Mayor Williams. She has been a longtime advocate for mental health services in this community. We're really happy that she could join us today. So with that, I'll ask you to introduce yourselves.
I'm Danny Lenz with the Office of Management and Budget.
I'm Lori Huss, Employee Relations.
Brad Davis, Planning and Resource Management Director.
Carrie Raditz, I'm the Director of the Mental Health Center.
Amber Barnes, I'm a Supervisor in Adult Mental Health.
Jeff Tate, Shakopee Police.
Rodney Sawyer, Savage Police.
Luke Hennon, County Sheriff.
Danielle Fox, Health and Human Services Deputy Director. And if you don't mind, I'll pass it over to our second row here. We've got some extra folks that can speak to some of these questions today.
I'm Jen Peterson. I'm a coordinated responder in the Scott County Sheriff's Office jurisdiction.
I'm Jessica Payne. I'm the coordinated responder at the Savage Police Department.
I'm Jamison Autumn. I'm the coordinator responder at the Shakopee Police Department.
Katie Pearson, coordinator responder at the jail.
Josh Davis, the investigation sergeant for Shakopee PD.
Scott Rickey, I'm the jail administrator.
Steve Collins, I'm the operations captain at the Scott County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you all very much for those introductions. Danielle, would you start us off by just giving us a brief reminder about the kind of the definition or the parameters of this program?
Sure. So today we're covering our behavioral health crisis system response, but there is a strong focus on coordinated response, which is a Scott County program, as Chris said, that just started, most of it in March of this year. So we're excited to have them. Coordinated response is similar, but not the same as co-response. It is also a small, I think we've even called it a pilot project in Scott County. We're looking at 4 FTEs. So the difference in coordinated response is that we are typically responding after the fact. It might be the following day, it might be the following Monday, it might be a couple days later, but after some sort of involvement with law enforcement, they can contact our coordinated responders who will then go out and work to provide some outreach and engagement with individuals or families that hopefully connect them to resources. We are 4 FTEs total, so you have our crew back here. It is a small program comparatively speaking, and we are primarily responding during Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30.
Thank you for setting that table for us. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the facilitators for questions.
Well, I'll start.
Thanks.
So on page 2, there's a reference, and it's right under the data review section, and it says, it's quoting, a positive increase in engagement. What exactly does that look like? Can you tell us more about what positive engagement and that increase looks like to you?
I'll be happy to answer that one. I think of a lot of times law enforcement will go to these calls, and sometimes it's numerous calls a week or a month at these same addresses, same people, but we have nothing in our tool belt to really provide a service. So we're kind of putting out that fire, leaving and coming back again, where now we're like, hey, here's what else we have. And now these folks behind me jump in and actually do some work, connect resources, and make some positive changes. And it's positive for that person, but I think of it specifically one that's right on the Shakopee border with us that Jameson's working with. Like, the neighbors also are going, wow, there's this program that actually kind of solved this problem that we're having, this neighborhood issue with somebody, creating a lot of pain for everybody that lived in that community. So I think it gets seen by law enforcement as positive, as well as the community that are observing these behaviors and stuff and knowing that something's being done versus us just showing up and having not a lot of options to fix it.
I think if you look at some of the data, sort of our before picture is on page 12, where it looks at the engagement rate of calls that law enforcement made. So coordinated response is only accessible to our law enforcement partners that we're contracted with. And on page 12, this is the look at sort of pre-coordinated response. So before, in 2022, for example, there were 626 calls made by law enforcement to our Canvas mobile crisis team, which does after hours 24/7 work as well. So law enforcement reaches out to them, says there's a mental health need, and only 6% of the time did that result in an assessment. The sort of after coordinated response is on page 9, which shows that their engagement rate is 68%. So when law enforcement contacted coordinated response and said there's an issue, 68% of the time they were able to engage them in the community. And the first question we'll probably get is, why is that, especially on that page 12 data? Our Canvas mobile health team is really positioned to respond to voluntary crisis requests. So if an individual calls on their own behalf and requests services, they will typically go out and engage them, whereas this team is sort of intended to meet that other percent, that 90+%, where either the person is maybe not interested in engaging in services, maybe they're not interested because law enforcement is the one offering it. And so they're really trained to go out and do that engagement and try to connect with that person in a way that makes those mental health services more available to them.
How much overlap is there in the clients between the Canvas mobile, if they're assisting someone, and then it's also the same population that coordinated response is assisting? How do you kind of coordinate that if you're working with the same?
Yeah, I would say there's some. So Canvas Health, they're able to do crisis stabilization, and so I think the individuals that are voluntary and willing to engage in services, Canvas Health is maybe more likely to take those, whereas historically the clients that this team in the back row is seeing is clients that Scott County has really never engaged with before, or has historically been pretty avoidant to engage in services. So I think that's kind of how we're deciphering things, but there definitely are clients that have overlap. And I guess in my perspective, like, the more support, the better.
So if we could go to page 7, we have a lot of law enforcement presence here, and I really want to understand the experience that you all are having with this program, how it's impacting the day-to-day operations of your officers out on the street. So like Chris alluded to, we don't have a lot of months of data here and kind of see the picture. And so I'm a little bit interested in just kind of what's the experience like, how does it actually work? And then also, are you seeing less people that you're going on repeated calls to? Is that part of a reason for the trend in data? Is it just kind of figuring out the system as we see it? You know, a little bit of a decline for Shakopee and Savage from April to June. understanding there's a lot of reasons for different perspectives. So open up to either chiefs or people that respond out in the field or however that works.
I think I can speak to that. We've seen frequent 911 users prior to that, and it's constantly officers responding to the same location. And like the sheriff stated, there's only so much tools in the toolbox that we have. And bringing on a coordinated response, oh, she's here, I can't say anything about her. But bringing about the coordinated responder on the Savage Police Department has really helped out a lot. It's more of a proactive approach than when just reporting it and then we're sending off referrals. Because we all know that in the hospital, there's that revolving door. But now it's being more proactive, getting those who are suffering a mental health crisis the resources that they so badly need. And when I say proactive, when officers respond to an incident where maybe it doesn't meet the threshold of a 48-hour hold, we provide that information to our unit, our program, and they respond the very next day, and they see that people care. We've received a lot of positive comments from the community, especially those parents or guardians that are at a standstill, at a brick wall, as to what they can do, how can they help their kids. And having us be more proactive is really cut down the frequent 911 users, and it provided a positive response in the community.
In speaking towards, like, I can only talk about Savage's coordinated response program because that's the one I'm a part of more so. So we had a large number of referrals in April, and one of the trends of why it's also going down is we've tailored our response. So at the beginning, it was if someone is experiencing any version of mental health, Jessica gets a referral, the coordinated response team. The coordinated response team gets a referral. And when we looked at those 70 referrals, not all of them actually needed our response, or they already had case management involved, things like that. So we were able to look at some of those and be like, oh, so this isn't a great use of this resource. This is something else we can send them to, or this was a Canvas Health call as opposed to a Jessica call. And another trend that you'll notice in May, like when the weather starts to change, mental health starts to change a little bit. Like once it starts to get warm outside, you'll see more people get outside, things like that.
Yeah, my question, when Scale hired a data analyst, their first project was trying to analyze data from law enforcement. And what we learned is that each law enforcement agency did things kind of radically different, or enough difference to skew the data and make it so we really couldn't understand the data. Now, here in this data, it looks almost like that we got some of a question there is, Shakopee seems to have almost half as many referrals as Savage, and Shakopee's larger. It's like 149 to 87 over these 3 months. I'm just wondering, is there a difference in how law enforcement is responding to this new program? I just would counsel or say at some point we need to make it standardized so we can understand the data, you know, if we ever want to understand the data.
Well, I think part of it, you know, is just our priority. There we go, sorry. Our priority right out of the box wasn't just give them every single mental health call that officers go on. We have some, and the sheriff alluded to one individual in particular that, you know, we've spent years and years and years dealing with another individual in town. And I remember sitting down with Jameson and saying, look, I don't expect you to solve this in 1 week or 1 month because we haven't solved it in 5 years. But we need a different lens and a different focus. So it's more, we have some very, very severe cases that are taking up an extraordinary amount of resources or have in the past. It's occupied a lot of his time. So I think it's more focusing on our biggest, most repeat individuals as opposed to, okay, let's get as much as we can on his plate. We're trying to, and things have evolved a little bit in terms of what we use him for in 4 months. We knew that would happen. I'm not surprised Savage calls Canvas a lot more than our officers do. So I'm not surprised that at this data, I'm not surprised that I kind of want to go back to the previous question just to comment a little bit. I'm not surprised at the success that this has had right out of the gate and the feeling from law enforcement. I know Rodney and I have talked about this for several years. We've seen our counterparts in Dakota County, Hennepin, Ramsey have this program for years. And the partnership that was able to be developed between our cities and the counties and the funding to be able to get this accomplished, it's worked everywhere else. Why shouldn't it work here? And just real quickly, it's interesting, the performance evaluations that we read in May, early June, where officers provide feedback, the number of individuals in our department that talked about this program in a positive light on those evals. We've also had a number of retirements in the last 6 months in our department, actually the last couple months. They're exit interviews. These are officers that have been here for decades, and them stressing how grateful they are and how important this program is, and happy that they're seeing this resource here in the department moving forward. I think speaks volumes. There's a lot they could complain about or wish they had or those types of things, but here's something that that's working, and both the outgoing officers know it and our current officers see that value as well. But I'm not surprised, or I think it's just a different focus right out of the gate in terms of, and some of the severity of our cases. I can't speak to Savage's cases, but they're very time consuming that we've got them working on.
This trigger another question. On a previous slide, it was the statement given, we don't count one person that has many referrals more than once. We don't duplicate that. I hope somewhere you are counting that as the total number, because when you come and say we're overwhelmed and we need another staff person, you're going to have to say, here's how many total contacts or total referrals, because multiple times for one person still takes, obviously, I would guess, time. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to the prior question is when we looked at implementation of this program, we looked at a number of different models. And what we found out is that every community is a little bit different. Every city was a little bit different. Every county was a little bit different. And nobody was right or wrong, right? Like these individual jurisdictions have their individual needs. And I think we intentionally had one FTE, one person tied to that jurisdiction so that they could work together to figure out what works for that team. So as was spoken to, I think the focus is a little bit different, but generally speaking, there's sort of this overall availability to meet those needs. We are, I think, working on our data development as well. A lot of this is hand counted. I think we hope that over time we can improve that data collections and the systems that can hopefully automate some of that to make it more available.
Final, kind of a follow-up from what you said, Chief Tate, about looking at the performance. So if we go to slide 10, we have kind of the satisfaction survey, and again, we're doing a short amount of time. Realize it's a changing program, but obviously the results are really positive right now. So just between the law enforcement agencies that use it and you, Danielle, or the coordinator response team, what's kind of that review process to make sure we're, one, meeting the needs of the law enforcement, as well as helping to educate them on the different paths that maybe it should go down, where we do have those cases where maybe it didn't quite need the coordinated response need, there was another resource? Or maybe how you look at the process going in the future.
I think you have to have the buy-in. You have to have the buy-in from the department and the boots on the ground. And the buy-in's already there. When Jessica came in, we started working together, and the constant, whether it be at briefings or at night with the officers coming together and working out a strategic plan of how to deal with a certain subject that needs the resources badly. We worked just recently, we worked with a homeless person, get the resources that is needed, everybody working together. We worked with one who was involved in domestic violence and had a child, and of course, the mental health issues that come along with that. We're able to put together the resources and come with a plan a plan of action. So having that buy-in is huge. And I think the officers see that and they saw it right away. And I don't think there's not enough hours in a day for Jessica to respond to all these cases that we have out there. I think we need more, to tell you the truth. And I'm hoping that throughout Scott County, that everybody will come on board and it's positive, very positive.
I think we do hope that this program is not the be-all, end-all, right? Like, we don't want to be providing all the mental health services, but we want to be a support to law enforcement. And I think over time, there's some trust that needs to be rebuilt that, because I think law enforcement obviously has been reaching out for mental health support for a long time, and sometimes nothing happened. And so part of that is getting that buy-in of the officers and really figuring out what their needs are and how we can support them. But I think on the flip side of that, as we work through this program development, we'll figure out the right calls that are meant for Canvas, the right calls that are meant for this team. Are there other resources that we can just readily make available to folks so that there's not a dependency on this crew? Because, as was stated, there's just not enough hours in the day. So it's about building up those resources, that knowledge, that education, and that trust so that we can work collaboratively together.
So part of my job here at Scott County is continuous improvement. And that, like, I absolutely celebrate the work that you are doing. But I also look at, you had some surveys that were less than positive. And I'm wondering if you can tell me about what you know about spaces where people have given you opportunity to make improvement.
Yeah, I would say the majority of the growth conversations from the survey results were around feedback. Law enforcement officers were wanting to know, what is the update? What did you guys do for this individual? What's going on? They want an update. But because of data privacy and HIPAA laws and things like that, if there's not a signed release in place, we legally can't tell an officer an update. We can't give them information about their diagnosis, the treatment plan, things like that. So there are different rules and things that we've had to follow and kind of get creative on. We've looked at like a messaging system of how we could send like a message update, but keep it vague enough to be like HIPAA compliant. But we haven't essentially solved that problem. But yeah, that was the common theme from some of the feedback of like law enforcement officers wanting updates.
So just a hopefully brief follow-up, because I'm talking too much already here. So I know that in some past Scott County delivers, there's been some really positive feedback with officers engaging with people that are involved in the criminal justice system in some way or another, going out, understanding a little bit what's going on in their lives. So has there been a push to try and get people to sign those releases so that, say, this officer knows what's going on? They're going to come, they're going to have compassion for you. They're going to be able to say, hey, have you called your caseworker? Have you called, anybody when they're showing up? Just because I've heard that in some of our specialty court stuff, where that officer to officer or the person to public's connection can really have an impact. So
yeah, absolutely. So we definitely encourage releases, but of course we can't force anyone to do something. But we are able to put an alert on their like chart, or I think you call it like jacket, that says like coordinator response is involved, or we can give tips and tricks to officers of like individual does best with a soft voice, or like a female officer or whatever. So we are able to put alerts on people's charts, which has been super helpful, and I think also has eliminated some of that duplication of referrals. But the downside of that is our team, there isn't a way for us to get alerted when law enforcement has gone out for a second time if they don't send another referral, or another Dynaform is what we call them. So again, we're trying to navigate and evolve this program, but yeah, some of those hiccups are definitely present.
So I had a question on page 14. So this is data from the Mental Health Center that looks at their availability to respond to crisis appointments for people in crisis. Your material today talks about the volume of people being referred to coordinated response is sizably larger than what you anticipated as you were designing this. And so I'm wondering then, as you are going out and engaging with people, do we have the resources to respond to those crises? Like how is this kind of data, this and other data sets, going to be impacted by this?
So we can respond to with a crisis appointment. Where we're challenged a bit is many of the referrals need a formal diagnostic assessment, and those require quite a lot of time from our therapist. So we have prioritized these clients along with all of our clients who need to be qualified for case management, adult and children. But it is I think we've talked in this meeting before about that's a challenge because especially for people on Social Security, only certain license levels can do that. And so we are continually talking about how to make that process efficient. In terms of the crisis, though, if they have a crisis referral, we must and do see those people as soon as the people make themselves available to us. It's just the follow-up on the formal diagnosis that can be a challenge.
Okay.
But you spoke to the estimated volume that we thought was coming our way, which we looked at the law enforcement calls to our mobile crisis team, which that year was over 400. And so we thought, okay, we're serving a subpopulation of Scott County. We're serving 3 of those jurisdictions. Let's just say that there is an increase because people, it's shiny, it's new, and people are connected to it. So let's say we've got between 400 and 500 that we're anticipating coming to coordinated response for the whole program for the full year. We're substantially higher than we expected even a couple months in. So I think that was startling for us. The other piece that you talked about was, do we have enough resources afterwards? So this is sort of the connector. This is the person identifies the individual or family in the community, but typically they are serving as a liaison, connecting them to the mental health center, connecting them to Canvas and some other community service providers. I think we are concerned generally about community resources and their capacity. In particular, our community service providers that are drastically challenged right now with workforce. And so we've been struggling with things like referrals to residential or community placements and supports because our provider network is just really struggling to have enough people to deliver the services.
Another key area is psychiatry. So for many of the people that are seen by crisis services, medication is a top need. And we're working right now to increase our psychiatry hours in the mental health center, as well as making a specific appointment with access for our coordinated response team.
So I'm going to jump in there because I know workforce challenges are expected to continue. So what is the impact to programming if the current state of workforce shortage is the reality going forward?
I think that makes us really nervous. I think it means that we might see more people show up in places like the jail or with law enforcement where they haven't been connected to some of those community supports sooner. And then we end up, I think, with more of those cases like that you see on page 6 that outlines our pre-petition screenings and commitments. You know, ideally, when someone presents with a mental health need, they get the lowest level of intervention needed to meet their need. And unfortunately, that sometimes just doesn't happen when we don't have that community resources built up.
I'm going to go back to page 5. The estimated number of mental health professionals in Scott County, I think that's a positive trend. You know, the last 3 or 4 years, a real increase. And it looks like more and more of those are in the private sector, not necessarily public employees. Are you seeing that trend continue? Do you think we'll continue to see a lot more of the private professionals coming into the county, or is that a trend that we might see level off?
I think some of the challenges with this data point is that we might have people living in Scott County. They might not be working in Scott County. The reality is right now that the licensed professionals that are providing this level of mental health services across the board are hard to come by. There is a huge shortage. And so even when we have staff who have licensed credentials, there are hospitals or healthcare agencies or other private mental health organizations who are contacting them on a regular basis and saying, come work for us. And sometimes they have a lot better benefits than even we offer as a county entity, let alone some of our nonprofit partners. So there's just a reality behind that. I hope, and I think I've heard from these guys, that this is work that they are really driven to do, that they feel is incredibly powerful and impactful on the population. And so I think that with our partnership with law enforcement and the mental health center and other community partners is really valuable in maintaining that current workforce, knowing that that's sort of the environment that we're in right now.
Another thing that we've kind of talked about related to the increase in mental health professionals in the county, private practice often are doing telemed, and they're not necessarily serving Scott County. Some are, of course, and some are located here. There's also many of the clients that they serve and that we serve are sometimes not suited to a private practice kind of provider. There's a lot of coordination, a lot of work among professionals and different kinds of services with these clients who have some really big needs. And those are not things that private practice mental health professionals tend to be involved in or are able to because they're not paid, not reimbursable services.
So we've tried to brainstorm, how do we grow our own talent? How do we recruit? Do we have volunteer opportunities or internships that can really pull some of that talent to Scott County so we can get them integrated within our system, and hopefully they'll be someday working for us or one of our local community partners.
But besides that, I think the point from the community indicator is it's a good thing, right? There's more private providers.
yes, that's
We
good.
want to bring those resources in, and I think that's the point of this from a community indication. There are more resources accessible now. Of course, we always want the best. I'm not disagreeing with that, and I think we have that. But it's a good thing, right, that we have more, because what we used to hear was mental health center, nothing. And now there are other opportunities for people. So it appears that data is trending, Dr. Raditz or Danielle, in the right direction.
I think as we're seeing those community mental health resources grow, I think that's always a great thing. I think some of our challenges are, who are they accessible to? And so I think some of the individuals that we're serving here at Scott County are those that maybe aren't going to be good candidates, or this sort of service isn't available to them. But yes, absolutely, these are the resources that could grow, that in some cases, these folks can just refer them out and they've got their needs met elsewhere.
Could we shift the conversation a bit to the jail social worker? That is a position that we talked a lot about last year. And so could we go to page 11? Oh, thank you, Evan. So I guess I'd like to just give Scott or Luke or Katie the opportunity to just respond to how this position has changed since the recommendations of the jail study. And clearly there's a trend down, and I'm interested in you talking about why there's a reduction in the number of referrals.
Yeah, I'll start it off. So as Chris mentioned, we talked about this position a lot during the jail study, how we'd had a part-time position for a couple years through a different grant, and how it really had proved itself as a need for the staff, for the inmates, for everybody involved. So now that we're running full-time, I mean, the feedback from staff, from people leaving our custody and knowing they're connected to resources. And then lastly, an idea that we didn't even imagine when we were first talking about the jail social worker was making her part of this team. And it really makes sense when you think of somebody in the community may end up in our jail, or somebody in our jail is definitely going to go back in the community in a short period of time. And having these social workers all networked and sharing information has been super helpful. I think the data points here could be explained with a bunch of reasons, but it's also a pretty small subset, 50 to 38. But definitely our adult population in our jail has gone down a little bit since this winter. So we're averaging probably closer to 95 to 100 inmates a day, and previous to that, and we're actually have lost probably, I'd say, 15 inmates a day almost during that time. So there's probably a direct correlation there. The unknown, the part that we could never prove, but it could be that the coordinator responders in the field are reducing the amount of arrests that come into the jail as well for some of these kind of nuisance crimes. And I think of the case I talked about before, somebody that's coming onto our radar multiple times a week due to neighborhood concerns, there's a good chance they're going to come to jail eventually because something's going to trip, because of that, those interactions. So there also could be some interactions there that a couple less people here and there getting arrested because they're getting treated through a coordinated response could turn into that number as well. It's not able to prove it that way, but that's what it feels, I think.
That'll be a piece to watch going forward as well. Yeah.
Totally.
Thanks.
No, I would just add to what the sheriff said. I think he's spot on. I do think population-wise, we are a little bit lower, and so you would see just less referrals that way. Beyond that, I do think that the program has gotten more word of mouth through the facility. And so internally, I think we need to look at just that workflow and the process of how referrals are getting to you. I don't know enough yet to decide if people are just taking active steps on their own from the staff perspective. So, yeah.
So Scott, on page 11, it talks about how all of that, the referrals and the work, is to have success after they leave the jail. Is there any early indicators? I know the stats we're young in this, but are there indicators of what helps people to be successful, or challenges for them not being successful as they leave jail?
I don't know, Katie, you want to speak to that? I think.
And I think that can be a really wide range. I think about, even just in the last week, there's been individuals who, they're incarcerated, they lost their job, they need help with background, they need to get insurance going, they need to, get a phone and all of these things. And then there's individuals who I've met with that all they needed was health insurance, but that was such a key part to get things going that I think it's, looking at the recidivism rates and then also just looking at what that need is of the person and what they want to work on and what their goals are as well.
So I'll piggyback on what Lori was talking about for staffing, and this is on the very last slide, page 17. It's about our ERTS facility that obviously was a big project for the county a few years ago. And we're seeing a decline in Scott County clients and total clients. Can you just talk to a little bit about the challenges there?
Yeah, we've heard from them directly multiple times over that a lot of this is tied to workforce. The ERTS and Crisis Facility is a 24/7 residential service. And each service, crisis or ERTS, intensive residential service, treatment services, requires different levels of staffing. And so it depends if they've got somebody able to work overnights in the foreseeable 10 days, if they can admit somebody to a crisis bed. That matters. So I think they are just really struggling to maintain the general day-to-day staffing of that facility, and that really impacts their capacity to take on new clients.
How is that impacting our either work through coordinated response or other places? I know we have the Anoka treatment facility. How is that impacting the continuum overall?
Well, I think we're lucky in Scott County in that we have priority of beds. And so I don't know that we've run into a situation where we have somebody who is a good fit that could come down to the ERTS or crisis from Anoka that has not yet been there. The challenge that we are seeing with individuals who are at the Anoka Regional Treatment Center that are no longer meeting criteria are that they're not appropriate for our ERTS and crisis facility. Their needs, their behaviors, perhaps their criminal history just are not a good match for this facility. And so I think that's where we see people waiting. Overall, this service was intended to be that step up, step down. So it could be that these folks are having to wait longer than we would like to get them into the local ERTS and crisis facility. It could mean they have to explore some other sites. Again, we are lucky in that we have priority and that if there is someone who they deem not acceptable, they have a conversation with us to see, what isn't working for them, how could we support them in a better way to make it work.
So, go ahead, Lori. Can we go to page 16? So when I looked at this, what occurred to me was it's showing that ADP is down, but when I watch the news, it seems that crime is everywhere. So can you help me make sense of this data? Is our community safer now than they were in 2008?
Last year was our record low crime rate for the city of Shakopee. We just got our numbers from June. So our first 6 months, we compared to our 6 months in 22. Our first 6 months in 2023 are lower than our record year last year. So I think there's a lot of reasons for that in terms of, and I think some crimes are going to continue to go down with new legislation. We're not going to be able to search vehicles the way we used to with the marijuana law that's been passed, and you're just not going to see crimes and the arrests that you did previously for some of the guns and drug offenses. Nationally, though, every study you see is somewhere between 25 and 33% of every call an officer goes on has some kind of mental health component, somebody in crisis. So that is not going away. Our crime is down in Shakopee, but our calls for service are slightly up. We're not at a 30-year low in calls for service. So it's really different in terms of how officers are triaging cases and calls for service, and it's just changed. The calls are there, they're more time consuming, but the actual reported crime is down.
So would you say that number is misleading? Is that what I heard you say?
I think it's misleading, absolutely. And we addressed this with our council, had the same questions, because again, our calls for service aren't going down. They're going up
You guys are
slightly.
just as busy as always.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're spending more, thankfully, we're able to spend more time on calls for service. But the actual number of reported crimes and the number of people we're booking in the jail are near all-time lows or all-time lows.
So it's really, they're different stories. How we do everything now is quite different than what it was in '08, as was put in this slide. Okay.
Absolutely.
Just a comment.
Yeah, Commissioner Alwick has a question.
You know, as I look at the mental health percentages and the population of the jail, sometimes it looks like about a third of the jail population is getting mental health referrals. I want to go back historically. This is long ago history, I guess. I remember hearing from Dakota County about all their programs that they offer in our jail. And I've been involved with the jail programming, you know, on a volunteer basis for about 20 years. But I was very impressed with that, the amount of program they had in the jail. And it's all geared towards having somebody released from jail be more successful, on a better course, better path. And so I guess I'm wondering, the social worker that's been hired in the jail, I'm hoping there's a link between that person and programming. In other words, that maybe there could be some social work sponsored programming in the jail that would help this issue. So any comment on that? Or
Yeah, I would say it really overlaps. Before we had 2 program officers, were just corrections officers assigned to help with programming. During our staffing shortages, they got pulled to work shifts. Now we're back up and running with that, and Katie really rounds that out, right? She's able to work with, as people are doing some more of that reentry kind of feel, not only helping them in the building, but helping them reintegrate when they come back out. So a lot of that is really getting smoothed out, and we're learning a lot more. And she comes with a different skill set than a corrections officer would have on understanding some of those issues and resources available. So I think we're seeing a lot of positive moves there of getting people back on their feet, as simple as we've talked about, even getting them home when they don't have a ride and not have them wandering around downtown Shakopee when they leave the jail. You know, we're reducing further crimes by doing little things like that, but really understanding those issues, like I said, around simple stuff as insurance and other things like that, help them get the process going, so when they go home, that'll take action actually, versus them going home with even less resources after they've been in custody.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ulrich, I'm glad I get to meet the famous Katie, because I sat through, I don't know how many jail study meetings, far less than most of these guys, and all I heard was this Katie, Katie, Katie. And you guys talk about passion for a job. She changed jobs to take this job to be a social worker in the jail. And so I think it goes to the heart of some of our employees and how much they care. But Katie, could you talk a little bit about that coordination? Because from Scott to other people in the jail to Chris would come back and Pam Selvig, and they couldn't say enough. So I'm glad you're here today, but talk a little bit about that so we hear some of that.
A coordination between myself and the jail, or?
The programming and that tie that you bring, that you're kind of a little bit of that glue that.
Well, so I actually office with the programs officers, which I think has been incredibly helpful just for us to discuss with one another, you know, what are you working on? What are we working on? How can we help each other? I know, you know, like for example, the programs officers work with the work release individuals, and they're out during the day most days. So often I won't even know who these people are, and they've been really good advocates of, this person really needs help, but they never get a chance to see you. How can we make this work? Going backwards a little bit to a previous question too about, reentry outside of the jail too. Anyone who meets with me, I give my card. They can call or email me once they're out. I would love it if all my referrals were 100% successful once people got out. But I always tell people, things happen, appointments get missed, things don't get followed up on. Give me a call. We'll keep working on it. I think, since day one, I feel the jail's been really receptive to having me there. Everyone's been really supportive, from leadership to the correctional officers, and I think the coordination's worked really well for me.
Oh, I have time for one more question, Chris.
Yes.
In the packet, there's a mention of exploring additional partnerships, and I'm assuming that might be additional cities beyond just Shakopee Savage and the Sheriff's Department. So talk to me a little bit about that. What does that exploration look like? What would it take to bring in a Belle Plaine, a Jordan, a New Prague, Elko, New Market into this type of program?
Well, so this group has a shared working group and a shared executive group, and so I think the key part of what makes this work is that partnership. And then there's the financial model behind the program, which we were able to secure grant funds that supported these staff in their first year, but then there is a joint financial contribution from the cities or the jurisdiction and Scott County to help pay the ongoing salary and benefits. And so I think we're in a good position right now if there is another partner that would like to join, and if the board is interested in that, because there is some additional funds that have been dedicated through the legislative session that could help support that. I believe these teams can speak better than I can, but it was the opioid settlement dollars that came to some of the cities that really provided that seed money to help move this along.
Is there any city in particular that's kind of reached out and is trying to learn more about your experiences?
I've heard buzz that Prior Lake is interested, but no formal connections. But I know, especially in the Savage Prior Lake High School, there's a lot of overlap of kiddos that Jessica can't help because their Prior Lake is their address, right? But they go to high school. Is Prior Lake High School technically in Prior Lake or Savage?
Savage.
Okay. See, it's all a blurred line. Like, no one really knows. And that's how I feel about the kids in the school too. Like, no one really knows like what side are they on, whose jurisdiction takes precedence. So if the referral comes from Savage, we can help and get involved. But if it's a Prior Lake kiddo, unfortunately we can't. So that's kind of an example.
That buzz has been garnered from the buzz of those other agencies that Amber is referencing have come from a lot of officers having friends on other police task force. So a lot of Savage officers do a lot of, I think it's called agency assists, where they go and help Prior Lake, or like other agencies will help other agencies, and that's where this has also come into question, where Prior Lake has had some mental health crises, and they know Savage has me. So they're like, oh, is Jessica free? But we have to say no, because Savage has the buy-in, Savage has the coordinator responder, not Prior Lake. So that's also been a conversation that we've been having in our jurisdictions.
I think ideally we would have the same opportunities, right, no matter where you live in Scott County. But I think that the challenge we're in right now is, one, we're piloting, we were testing this out. We were in a place where we had some one-time funding that we could make use of. And so I think we're seeing things and it's working well. And so if there is that interest, we're certainly open to that conversation.
I think just real quickly on that, though, nationally, I mean, this is seen as a best practice model in the industry. And especially this spring, we didn't unfortunately get to jump on it, but noticing a lot more federal grants for this type of programming. So that is something I know our city grant coordinator has got her eye and focus on, but I do think that there is more funding opportunities. You alluded to one of them moving forward for this type of program. I hope it does expand, because again, this is a best practices approach. I think that's been well recognized nationally now.
So beyond then the stats, what says it's working? Like, what are some of those human, we know it's working?
Well, I can tell you, if Luke, Rodney, and I surveyed our officers, and 3% said it was strongly agree and support. There's not really a program we have where you're going to get that kind of buy-in. I think that is that is really speaks volume. You know, cops can be a little jaded and opinionated, and for them to be that, you know, focused on something like this right out of the gate says that. And again, this is new and it's 4 months of data. Dakota County, Hennepin County, I mean, every agency has one, and the agencies that do have them, I know several in Hennepin County that are expanding. They want another employee in the building. So you don't get that if the program's in that kind of replication throughout, if it's not working. So I think just, yeah, the replication, the desire to add and look at these calls for service differently is what's propelling a lot of this and why we wanted it so badly.
Maybe we should pause here and there's a microphone. I think Tracy was going to help us with that. But I'd like to offer anybody in the audience who has a question or a comment.
Hi. Chair and members of this committee, I just wanted to talk a bit more about the funding situation because opioid money was available to everyone. Savage and Shakopee chose to actively get this money to do this pilot project. The other cities didn't, so that's the difference in the service and what's happening in the county, and of course in cooperation with the county.
I'll ask a question.
Leslie. Barb, help me here, or Sheriff. I don't believe the smaller cities received opioid dollars. I believe it was.
No, they didn't. You had to apply for them.
They couldn't. The way it was allocated out, it came based on population. So, yeah.
Yes, yeah, I think that's correct. I think, yeah, based on population size. One of the questions I guess I have is when we were first looking at this model and kind of trying to decide between coordinated and co-response, where you're going out with law enforcement. And when we had talked to Woodbury and Dakota County, they said coordinated was a really good way to kind of step in and phase into this. Now that we're fresh into like month 5. Any thoughts on like as far as does coordinated feel like the right, I guess, dose of support?
I don't feel we're locked into one way or another. If Jameson needs to hop in with an officer, he can do it. There are certain follow-up calls that he does do, including with our overdose. Anybody we've Narcaned, he does a follow-up visit with them, with plainclothes officers, Sergeant Davis. I don't feel like we're locked into it one way or another. Whatever we label the program, I think I wouldn't get caught up on labels.
Yeah, I would say it's had a very natural ebb and flow of like some scenarios need a co-response for sure, and some are like we don't need an officer present. So it's been a very natural flow of communication, and which I think has been great.
And I think earlier when we looked at the co-responder, the issue I saw was that would only cover, say, 40 hours a week. You know, if we hired an extra deputy and had a social worker paired up, they could go help in the cities as well, but that's 40 hours a week, and then they're kind of done, where this team is, you know, tackling those problems behind the scenes. You know, it's 40 hours a week, but they're gathering anything that happened overnight, anything that happened over the weekend, and working on that, not just waiting for emergency to happen. So it could be in the future in addition to this kind of background, but I think this is a more effective way to start it and get some accomplishments.
I think we also know there are some big things coming our way. We have the implementation of 988 happening nationally, which will essentially be the equivalent to 911 with police and fire. So if there's a police and fire response, you call 911. The idea that soon you'll be able to call 988 and you'll receive a response. I'm not sure we're quite there yet in having that, but we know that that's coming. There's potentially, again, some of those funding opportunities that partner with that. And we just might need to look at some internal Scott County continuum efficiencies, knowing that we're dealing with those resource shortages in finances and in staff. So we might need to reshuffle that deck a little bit.
Other comments or questions from the audience or from the team members in the second row? Is it brief?
It will be very brief.
Thank you.
We were asked to present some success stories anyway. I've been working with a 19-year-old since the inception of our program, essentially. He grew up in Savage, resident of Savage, has schizoaffective disorder, which means he has psychosis, where he's hearing and seeing things, but he's also got a mood disorder, so he has really high highs and really low lows. In the course of the 4-ish months of me working with him, it started from not wanting any care, what we would call service resistant. It was him driving off in his truck through his neighbor's lawns. It was him driving all hours of the night, not sleeping, high on marijuana. It was him not taking his medication. Through this program, we were able to coordinate with his psychiatrist, his primary care provider, to get him an injectable. When the injectable didn't work, we got him to a hospital. The hospital set up aftercare, and I was there to follow through with that aftercare to make sure that he was set up for success. So it's now gotten to a point where he was recently petitioned for commitment through Ramsey County because he got an apartment in White Bear Lake, but he comes down to Savage where his parents still live. And he was able to sign up for a variety of resources with my assistance, and now he's able to take his medications on his own, and he wants to continue to live independently, but he is also one of those people we're waiting for staffing to get an IRTS bed. He's been on our IRTS wait list for a couple weeks now. So we're hoping that will bridge the gap and that will make it so full circle he's able to be a surviving independent human.
Thank you. That was helpful. With that, Mr. Chair, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions? I see Commissioner Brennan.
I'm just curious, when you talked about the Savage Prior Lake School, how many calls do you say that you go into the schools and work with the students?
How many calls for service at Prior Lake High School?
Oh, any of the cities, Shakopee or do you know, do you go into the schools and work?
Well, having a school resource officer embedded in Prior Lake High School, which is in Savage, by the way. It really helps, and we do keep track of every student we come in contact with. We do keep track of that. As far as mental health goes, they do have social workers within the school. You know, that's a city within a city. I don't think they have enough, to tell you the truth, social workers, that is. But I think a lot of times our school resource officer will get up with Jessica and get some pointers and some advice on how to deal with some of the kids that are really struggling. So that has helped out a great deal.
We do have data from our mobile mental health crisis team, which shows the referrals that come in from schools looking for a mobile assessment to come out. There's very few. We can share that data, but I think there's fewer than you would expect. I think primarily, as you said, there are resources within that school, and so many of them provided through our Scott County Mental Health Center, where they would go sort of to the resource that's on site there first. But sometimes they do reach out to our mobile crisis team.
Commissioner Brecky.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I know that this has been a lot in 4 months, really exciting work. And just a few, I don't think I have any questions, but a few things I heard today that really spoke to me. You know, I get that our different police departments have different culture, different processes, different personality, and this is going to evolve differently. And that's the challenge with having the consistent data. So I just hope we really let these programs be the best that they can be without trying to hamper it because we're looking for consistent data, yet I know we need the data. So it may look a bit different. Chief Tate, when you said, you know, well, this is sometimes a co-responder model, I'm like, yes, good, because I don't think we have to put it into a box, and we need to, we have to follow laws and regulations and things and grant requirements, but let's make this the best we can be. So I'm just really happy to hear that it can and is evolving a little bit different. Hearing about I hope we can increase the ability to get signed releases, because I'm sure that interaction between you people, the social workers and the officers, for our hardest clients in the toughest situations is just important, because this is not going to be a one-time thing. Oh, one time we gave them these resources and now they're all better. So that continued talking, I hope we can find some ways to improve that. And then I just wondered about and challenges with kind of the 8 to 4:30 model. Are there folks that, you know, you're not connecting with them because maybe they have a job, maybe they're at a place where you can't get to? What thoughts on that? How might that evolve? So there is a question. Go ahead.
So 8 to 4:30 is a really beautiful model for anybody who works in this field. So you can have a really good home work-life balance. I will agree that mental health does not live in an 8 to 4:30 world. But the part of being a co-responder or a coordinated response is that we get to follow up the next day, and we do try really hard to meet people where they're at. So if they work in 8 to 4:30, I've stayed late to be like, okay, you get home from work at 5, I'll be there at 5, I'll flex my time, and my supervisor is very supportive in that. And I've done ride-alongs at night to see what that looks like to build rapport with my police department. But I also would argue when we have another person coming in who isn't trained like a police officer, I don't know if I'm comfortable going out on co-response mental health calls in the middle of the night due to my sleep depravity. I don't know if that's a good fit for me. I can't speak for my team, but I do know when I have the follow-up, a lot of our officers will say, person works 8 to 4:30, you'll have to call else other times, or works overnights. You know, we get a lot of that data from our officers so we can connect with them at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
I think it's been a lot about drawing those boundaries, right? Like we want to make sure that we're protecting our staff and not burning them out, but we also recognize there are needs beyond that model.
I think what also helps is that it's mandated that all of our officers receive the crisis intervention training, the 40-hour course. And we started that back in 2014, where all law enforcement within Scott County, in partnership with Mid-Waconton Sioux community, started that, sending officers to the crisis intervention training. And now we continue that today. And I think that helps in the evening when officers have that training and they know that it's going to be followed up on the next day. So they're able to de-escalate and calm people down in knowing that there's going to be help coming your way. And I think that really helps.
Okay, anyone else? Commissioner Beer.
Thank you very much. This is a heavy lift, no doubt about it, and super intriguing, to be sure. I just wanted to, just page 1, quickly just look at the goal you are trying to accomplish and just maybe open that up just a little bit and ask a question. It says, individuals in need of crises resources can access them safely and timely so that they can thrive in the community. That's a great goal. I'm just curious with the jurisdictions that we have in different departments, it just seems like that, you know, for such a big project and such a big lift, is there such a thing as an internal goal that you're trying to accomplish as well as an external goal, you know, out in the community? I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but is there any way that you can elaborate more on what your internal goals, especially if different departments, see the 3 guys with 3 very shiny badges, but different departments also, like, hey, this is I don't want to leave the answers, but you Chief Tate kind of mentioned something that allows your officers to actually spend more time on calls, even though that crime is down. You know, that seems to be a noble aspiration and something that's maybe being accomplished through this. But is there specific internal goals and specific external goals? Did you see this happen?
Yeah, real quickly, I guess some internal goals would be to reduce, you know, some of those most severe cases that have frustrated officers for years. That some of them we have been very, very close to using deadly force in. We all have stories, and these individuals have had weapons. And one I referred to, she held up a bank with a firearm. It's that kind of case. If we can reduce our involvement in it, in a lot of these cases should not have a uniformed officer responding to deal with some of these problems. That's not the best way to handle that call for service. So triaging that, lowering our repeat calls for service to a specific individual, getting them the help they need, and so you don't see them on the call sheet anymore. I think there are other, again, types of things that we're looking at in terms of overdoses in our community and the outreach we can do with those individuals who we usually see again after we've Narcan them. Is there a way that we can get them into a treatment, into some type of services? So internally, I think that's the other goal. I think that was important, was making sure everybody, that this worked from a fit standpoint, and that our officers were comfortable going up to Jameson, visiting him in his cubicle and sharing that information. And I think that's happened. We've met that goal probably week one. We probably had five names in the community sitting on his desk before he even, signed into the computer. So officers were glad to see them, and I think internally that goal was met right away. But reducing repeat calls for service, getting people resources that they need, and especially some of the folks that we've been real close to having to use force on. That's the last thing we want to do. I don't know if you guys have.
No, I agree. I think, there's liability reduction, whether it's out in the street for our officers by having these resources and getting people on the right track versus something horrible happening or something happening in our jail. That, once again, looking at these jail numbers, is some of that because we're treating people better and helping them get on the right foot versus ending up in the systems, and then we incur liability with all those interactions. I think another piece, as we've talked about the survey, and the cops, they expect this, they want this, and as we're all hiring and recruiting, this is another piece that helps us retain people, shows we're doing best practices, we're a good place to work, we're not essentially hanging the officer out there either by making them go to these calls without any resources behind the scenes to help them. And I think that's appreciated by the staff, and I think will reflect in some of our retention issues that will be improved by having more resources available.
I think for us within Health and Human Services, some of our drive for this was really to partner in a better, different way. I think we've been looking for ways to help support law enforcement, and we've been hearing sort of those struggles over the last, well, at least since I started here 9 years ago, of just sort of this unmet need. And so how do we meet the needs of that person who's in the community? How do we support our law enforcement officers? And then hopefully, how do we maximize the efficiency of the system that we have locally, whether that's our private providers or our nonprofits, our hospital system, all of that. How can we use this as sort of a link to connect those pieces together and sometimes to make up for those shortfalls when we don't have resources?
And just a follow-up question, if I may. Talked about, I heard tools in the tool belt, tools in a toolbox. This is another new tool for us. It's not a new tool out and about, right? It's new to us. In the 4 months or whatever it's been, do you and the groups that you represent feel like this is one of those more transformational type tools, both internally and externally, that actually moves the needle and changes people's lives for generations? I know it's, again, new to us, but not new out and about in society. Does it rise to that kind of level?
I think it's a new paradigm shift from the way we used to do things back in the day to where now we have the resources available to help us, where all these legislative mandates, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but all these unfunded legislative mandates put these problems on the desk of law enforcement. Now it makes us think outside the box. How can we work? How can we communicate? How can we partner? And we've done that with the county and the various law enforcement agencies in Scott County. And I brag about it everywhere I go in the state of Minnesota. And they say, how can you get along with the county so well? I said, why not? Oh, what's the problem? But this is a prime example of a successful program, even though it's in its infancy and we're building a strong foundation, that the paradigm shift has really turned towards community safety, officer safety, getting people help when they need it. And that's our huge goal. Now, when I first met Jessica, Her and Amber came into our annual department meeting, and we hit it off right away, except when she said she's a Green Bay Packer.
Yeah, that's.
That ruined everything. No,
On the interview?
no, but it's been great,
We've seen absolutely some impact of this. It does definitely, I think, have opportunity for more of that transformation. I think it will require that evolution over time of how do we make sure that we're building in those system efficiencies so that this isn't a standalone program, but it's working across our continuum so that everybody's doing their part.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's, is that everything? Okay, good. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming today, and thank you for the great presentation. We sure appreciate it, and see you next time. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give about a 30-second deal before we go on to consent. There's a lot of talking.
Yeah.
Okay,
Are we careful tomorrow?
good to see you. Thank you. Yep.
Oh, thank you.
I heard you got a 5-year contract extension, Rodney. Did you get a 5-year contract extension or 10, did I hear?
Is there guaranteed money?
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to consent agenda. These items are deemed non-controversial and normally pass in one motion. 7.1, adopt resolution number 2023-131, approving a conditional use permit for an electric substation, Dakota Electric Association applicant and Zwires Property LLC property owner in section 25 of New Market Township. 7.2, adopt resolution number 2023-149, approving a conditional use permit to operate a microbrewery, taproom, and private event space, Union Trail LLC applicant and property owner in section 8 of Blakely Township. 7.3, adopt resolution number 2023-152, authorizing entering into an agreement with SRF Consulting Group, Inc. for the Trunk Highway 169 Bluff Drive Overpass Project in Sand Creek Township. 7.4, adopt resolution number 2023-157, entering into a drug treatment court cooperative agreement with the state of Minnesota. 7.5, adopt resolution number 2023-167, approving contracts with All Light Solutions and Workday for the purchase and implementation of the Workday Enterprise Resources Planning Software System. 7.6, adopt resolution number 2023-170, amending the 2023 budget for utilization of American Rescue Plan Act funds and awarding a contract to SM Henches and Sons, Inc. for the Moraine Addition Housing Trust Project. 7.7, adopt resolution number 2023-174, awarding a contract to JF Brennan Company for the Spring Lake Regional Park ADA Fishing Pier and Kayak Launch. 7.8, adopt resolution number 2023-177, authorizing an amendment to the cooperative agreement with Sand Creek Township for the Trunk Highway 169 and Bluff Drive Overpass Project. 7.9, adopt resolution number 2023-179, approving an interim use permit for a detached accessory dwelling unit, Daniel and Teresa Sklusacic, applicants and property owners in section 33 of Cedar Lake Township. 7.10, adopt resolution number 2023-182, accepting the allocation of additional Minnesota Department of Corrections funds, approving the addition of 10.2 full-time equivalent positions, and authorizing a budget amendment. 7.11, adopt resolution number 2023-187, reappointing Dr. Andrew Baker as Scott County Medical Examiner for a 4-year period effective January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2026. 7.12, adopt resolution number 2023-192, approving the acceptance of additional funding and amendment amending the 2023 budget for the Adult Mental Health Initiative and entering into agreements for the funding. 7.13, adopt resolution number 2023-193, authorizing entering into a cooperative agreement with the Belle Plaine Township for cost participation in the county drainage ditch 10 repair project. 7.14, approve the 1 to 4 day temporary on-sale liquor license for Parish of St. Joachim and Ann in Louisville Township. 7.15, approve record of disbursements and approve claims. Those are the 15 items on consent. Are there any you'd like to have pulled for discussion, a separate vote or anything?
I just want to make a comment on 7.7, that JF Brennan Company is
Yes.
not, I'm not affiliated with JF Brennan Company. So I just want to make sure
I
that
thought
the
you got
commissioners.
residual checks from them.
No.
But you don't anymore.
No.
Okay.
Just want to make sure everybody knew that.
Okay, thank you. I did think that. With that, is there a motion to approve those 15 items on consent?
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
And there is a second. Let the clerk later figure that out. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're going to move on to 8.1, and that is the presentation of the Spirit of Scott 2023 Quarter 1 Recognition Awards. I see Greg Wagner coming up.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Greg Wagner, representing the Spirit of Scott Committee. As the board knows, each quarter we get nominations from county employees that recognize their coworkers for things where they go above and beyond their normal workday. And so generally each quarter we get 30 to 40 nominations, and we select usually 3 to 4 to recognize here at the board. So the first recognition today is Lori Weldon and Alan Herman, recognized by Jake Grusing. In addition to serving customers who are able to visit library branches, the library services homebound people through a delivery program. Often, those who are homebound need to go beyond finding the next good read. In speaking with the family of one of our homebound customers, Lori learned that the customer had been in the hospital recently and now needed transportation to and from medical appointments. The family had tried setting up transportation on their own, but they weren't having any luck. So Lori connected with our co-recipient, Alan Herman, and Alan was immediately able to reach out to support the family and help them with their transportation needs. So Jake was grateful to both Lori and Alan for working quickly to make things a little easier for the resident and her family. Next recipient is Andrew Nelson, and he was nominated by Lisa with Health and Human Services. Recently, the state of Minnesota rolled out their scripts update for child support. Some of the scripts were missing information, and Lisa was not able to find out why from another county. She passed that information on to Andrew, who fixed the problem right away. Then she was contacted by another supervisor from Clay County, and who reached out to Lisa because they were having problems with their program upgrade as well. She gave her Andrew's email, and he was able to connect within minutes to Clay County and provide them with a fix. So Lisa really appreciated Andrew's assistance because it resulted in a quick fix for another county instead of jumping through a bunch of hoops with the state. So thanks to Andrew showing that different entities can work together to solve problems. And our last recipient is Ashley DeLeon, nominated by Jennifer Panning. Scott County resident was hospitalized for complications with diabetes. He had no health coverage to get his needed medication or to see a doctor. He was told by the hospital that he needed these medications to basically survive. Jennifer was able to assist verbally getting his medical assistance application by phone and got it to Ashley. And Ashley processed this on a Friday afternoon within a couple hours so the resident could get his medications from the pharmacy before the weekend. When Jennifer called the client to give the coverage information, he was shocked that The county was able to process this information in a matter of hours. He expressed his deepest gratitude and said this was definitely a life-changing situation for him. So thanks to Ashley for her quick work in making a huge difference in that client's life. So those are the individuals we're recognizing this month. And I'd like to thank the board also for supporting the group and our cookout that we had the other week. It was very well attended, and fortunately we had a nice day for that. So thanks for supporting our organization and the county employees.
Thank you, Commissioner
I
Brennan.
just want to thank those employees for going above and beyond and really exemplifying what our county is all about. So thank you to all of them.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Great job. Thank you. Okay, with that, we are going to move into committee reports and commissioner updates. And I'm going to start with Commissioner Brecky. Maybe I won't.
Ready?
I'll start with Commissioner Aldrich today.
On the 12th, I had the Micah Collier County Zoom meeting. We talked a lot about the Met Council governance and how we would engage with that. And now, in the process of that, they did select one commissioner to be on that governance group, which was the only one position allowed, and that will be Carla Bingham from Washington County. The 17th, STA meeting. Later that day, Fish Executive Committee meeting. That's into my report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Beer.
Sure, on the 11th, we all had the post-board workshop. On the 12th, MESB. On the 13th, had the good fortune of, what do we call it? Tree train for MA. It was with Leslie and Barb Dahl. Sorry, microphone. Everyone heard that? We'll just keep going. Yeah, it probably got it covered. So we were just, with all the MA stuff going on and all the requalification, we just wanted to spend some time with that group and say, hey, thanks for all that hard work and thanks for tempting me with all those really good donuts and bagels and everything else. But if you're going to that second floor again, chocolate, donuts, reigns. So just remember that. And then, of course, the ditch board this morning. That concludes my report.
Good. Thank you very much. Commissioner Brecky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. July 11th, we all had the workshop after the board meeting. Also on July 11th, I met with Chris Harder to discuss the 2022 annual performance report and just give some comments and questions as we continue to try and collect data and make sure what we're doing is the best we can do. July 11th, had my monthly meeting with the county administrator, Leslie Vermillion, and then the evening of July 11th, attended the Blakely Township monthly board meeting. A couple things there. They had actually kind of a serious issue for the people who lived on that road, an incident where hundreds, maybe thousands of nails were thrown on the road, and people all along there had been experiencing, it's a gravel road, flat tires and more flat tires and more flat tires. And as we know, when nails get mixed in gravel, they're very difficult to get out. So Joe Wida, was so responsive, was able to find a piece of equipment that could be rented that Blakely Township paid for, but then that our staff helped to go through that road and really collect a good amount of those nails. And, there's some grading and other things being done, but just an example of, trying to work together to solve problems and not sticking to jurisdictional lines. And like I said, very serious issue. One family's there, they already spent $1,000 on tire repair in just the days prior to that. And that was good. And then I was there for some discussion from the applicant on the CUP we just approved, we just approved for the new microbrewery in Blakely. As you probably all know, Euphoric closed down a couple years ago, and these folks are going to reopen a smaller tap room and event space. And it was just good to talk about some of our coordination between planning and the township and the county and all that. So really, I always like it when I get down to Blakely. July 12th had the Micah Suburban County meeting that Commissioner Ulrich already talked about. I just think we all should thank him for applying to be on that Met Council Governance Task Force, because quite a job, and I know a lot of people applied. He has been instrumental in helping that group understand some of the history and the progress that's been made on that issue by our group already. July 13th had Justice Steering Committee. July 15th and 16th, spent some time at Belle Plaine Barbecue Days after some iffy weather Friday night. The weekend turned out really good for that annual celebration. And even though, some major construction going on in downtown Belle Plaine, the annual festival was able to occur in the parade with great crowds, just really great crowds. July 17th had my final community supervision work group meeting, and then July 18th, today, we all had ditch board. Thank you. End of my report.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Brennan.
Almost. July 11th, I attended the CDA meeting, and they are working on their 2024 budget. July 11th, also, I attended the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. July 12th was a tour of the Center for Entrepreneurship, which is a part of the CDA. So I got the opportunity to see what that program was all about and meet some of the business owners that are working out of there. July 12th, I also attended the Scott County Historical Society meeting. July 13th was a SHAC meeting. July 14th was my monthly meeting with Leslie Vermillion. And July 17th, I took a tour of District 2 in Scott County and saw a lot of exciting things. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My report, the 11th, the workshop, the 12th, the MESB, Metro Emergency Services Board met. And on the 17th, as Commissioner Brennan had mentioned, we toured a few places, some of recent interest, like the McMahon Lake outlet that's going to probably get going here, the Cedar Lake Roundabout on County 2, the water plant out in Elko Market. So the YMCA, they're really coming along nice there. And so, and then last night, Prior Lake had their a workshop on their what they're going to be doing for their budget and levy, and they're starting to, they're just short of 11% is what I gathered there. So, and a lot of what's driving that is just inflation and the full-time fire department that's going to be coming on. And part of the fire department thing is there's some pensions for some of these guys that have been there for so many years, and if they go to full-time, they would lose that or so. So those guys want to keep that and get a different, become full-time, and so that's kind of a tough deal. And then this morning, the ditch meeting. So that's my report. Attorney, or excuse me, Leslie, do we have a report?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple things. I think Commissioner Brecky and Barb Dahl are going to represent us in NACO here in a week, and we're going to receive the Health and Human Service National Award for the FRC, so hopefully they'll be able to present that when they come back. That's pretty big honor to get the Top Dog Award, so that's a big deal that's going to come up here. We have the JAF Phase 2 discussion following this board meeting. They followed up on some of the direction you provided them late last year, and we're going to learn a little bit about that. Next Tuesday is not a board meeting, but you have a budget work session next week where Danny will present kind of what we know so far out of the legislative session and some of the recommendations out of the work that we've been doing. And then following that, we start the month of August and September with a budget discussion pretty much every Tuesday, then moving forward, bringing back the things you commented on last year, some of the things that we might be struggling with, and some of the things that are going well. So looking forward to those discussions. That's the end.
Okay. Thank you. Attorney Hocevar, do you have a reason to recess?
Before I leave in suspense on whether we meet today or not, I will tell you that, kind of following in line with today's discussion, Judge Lennon this morning filed her order on the Sabret case. That's the beheading case. He's been found not guilty by reason of mental illness. That hearing is at 1:30, where she'll announce her sentence publicly. There are a few victim impact statements that will be heard by the judge. And following that, my office will proceed to file civil commitment paperwork to have him civilly committed. So that's what's happening today. So that's kind of falls on with the discussion that we had this morning. So that is going on.
Okay.
So other than that, we did not need to meet.
Okay, good. Thank you for that report, and yeah, very busy over there. So with that, we have a workshop coming up, as Leslie had mentioned, about the JAF. And so I would look for a motion to adjourn. Motion, is there a second? Second. Second from Commissioner Orwick, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?